Dear, dear students, today we'll be talking about what is cell biology, what are the five kingdoms that exist on earth, what are the different type of cells, and what is cell biology and the modern cell biology. Let us see what is cell biology. Cell biology is a branch of biology that deals with the structure of the cell and the function of the cell. And the cell is a basic and fundamental unit of life. This field promotes the study of the cell in order to have a deeper understanding of tissues, organs, and organisms that cells composed of. The study and the structure of function of cells is known as cytology. In Earth, all organisms are composed of structural and functional unit of life, which we call it as cell. The body of the organisms like bacteria, protozoans, and algae, all organisms on Earth is made up of a cell. And the organism which is made up of a single cell is called as unicellular organism. An organism such as fungi, plants, and animals which are composed of many cells, which we call it as a multicellular organism. Example, a human which is built up of 1 trillion cells. These cells are vary in their size, shape, and their structure, and they do a different functions, and the number of cells may also vary in different organisms. Life on Earth is classified into five kingdoms. What are they? Prokaryotic kingdom, the example bacteria, and others. Four kingdoms are animals, plant, fungi, and protista, which we call it as an eukaryotic cell. Prokaryotic cells are smaller and simpler than the eukaryotic cells. What are the difference between prokaryotic cells and the eukaryotic cells? Prokaryotic cells are smaller in size, which ranges from 2 to 5 micrometer, whereas eukaryotic cells are larger cells greater than 10 micrometer in size. Prokaryotic cells are always unicellular, whereas multicellular organisms always are eukaryotic cells. And prokaryotic cells have no separate nuclear compartment, so it is the nucleus, the DNA is freely floated, and they do not have any membrane bound organelles such as mitochondria and chloroplast. Whereas in eukaryotic cells, they always have an intact nucleus and they have a membrane bound organelles. In prokaryotes, DNA is circular without proteins, whereas in eukaryotic cells, DNA is a linear form and always associated with the tightly associated protein called chromatin. In prokaryotic cells, ribosomes are smaller and 70th ribosomal unit, whereas eukaryotic ribosomes are larger and they're made up of 80th unit. Prokaryotic cells do not have a cytoskeleton, whereas eukaryotic cells always have a cytoskeleton, and the cell divide by binary fission in prokaryotic cells, whereas in eukaryotic cells divide either by mitosis or a meiosis. And the reproduction in prokaryotic cell is always asexual, whereas in eukaryotic cell reproduction is sexual or asexual. This is a structure of the prokaryotic cell. Unicellular organism, example bacteria, which do not have any membrane bound organelles such as nucleus and mitochondria, and prokaryotic cells ranges from 0.2 to 2 micrometer in size. Whereas the eukaryotic cells, which is made up of a different type of cells, take the example of a human, which are made up of a different type of cells. These cells function differently and they express a different set of genes, so we call it as a differential gene expression which takes place in eukaryotic cells. Whenever the genes are necessary, the genes gets turned on or switched on when required, and otherwise the genes get switched off whenever it is not required. If you see the structure of an animal cell consists of a nucleus, Golgi body, lysosome, a cell membrane, cytoplasm, peroxisome, cilium, centriole, mitochondrion, cytoplasm, ribosome, rough and smooth endoplasmic reticulum, and sometimes they do have a flagella. There is a plant cell which is made up of nucleus, yeah, it contains the nucleus, Golgi body, vesicle, and the important that part of the cell, plant cell, is cell wall, which makes a difference between the plant and animal cell. So plant cell have a cell wall and cell membrane, and also contains other organelles such as peroxisome, plasmodesmata, another important part of the cell which distinguishes plant cell from the animal cell, and it consists of cytoplasm, mitochondria, chloroplast, central, a big vacuole, smooth and rough endoplasmic reticulum, and the ribosomes. If you see the similarity and the differences between the plant and the animal cell are the common features where plant and animal cell share the common organelles such as mitochondria, Golgi apparatus, rough and smooth endoplasmic reticulum, nucleus, cytoplasm, and the ribosome. So, how to define a cell? Cell is defined as a unit of protoplasm that is bounded by the plasma membrane or a cell membrane, and that contains nucleus. What is protoplasm? Protoplasm is nothing but a life-giving substances which includes the cytoplasm and the nucleus. Cytoplasm includes all the organelles such as ribosome, mitochondria, Golgi, plastid, lysosome, and endoplasmic reticulum. So the cell is defined as a unit of protoplasm bounded by the cell membrane, and that contains the nucleus. So every cell have three major components. These are three major components. Number one, plasma membrane, outermost layer of the cell. Second one, cytoplasm, that includes all the organelles. And third one, DNA, that is naked or freely floated in the prokaryotic organism, whereas in eukaryotic cell, that is DNA have the is been covered by the nuclear envelope and or a nuclear membrane in eukaryotic cell. Let us talk about the history of cell biology, how it all started. It all started with the invention of a microscope by Janssen in the year 1590. The invention of microscope made the cosmos accessible to the human observation. The microscope opened up the smaller worlds, showing what living forms were composed of. The cell was first discovered and named by Robert Hooke in the year 1665. He remarked that it looked strangely similar to the cellular or small rooms which monks inhabited, thus deriving the name the cell. However, what Hooke actually saw was the dead cell walls of a plant cell's cork as it appeared under the microscope. Hooke's description of these cells were published in Micrographiae. The cell walls observed by the Robert Hooke gave no indication of a nucleus or other organelles found in the most living cells. The first man to witness a live cell under the microscope was Anton van Leeuwenhoek, who in 1674 described the algae Spirogyra. Anton van Leeuwenhoek also saw the bacteria under the microscope. Later, in 1831, the man Robert Brown observed that all cells have a centrally positioned body which he termed the nucleus. The 19th century actually witnessed the important milestones in cell biology by formulation of cell theory, formulation of protoplasm theory, formulation of organismal theory, discovery of cell division, nucleus, protoplasm, chromosome, plastids, Golgi apparatus, nucleus, chromosomes, what is the role of nucleus in heredity, and discovery of mitochondria, and they also proposed a germplasm theory, to list a few. In the year 1838, the two scientists, Theodore Swan and Matthias Clinton, when they were enjoying the dinner coffee and talking about their studies on the cells, and it was suggested that when Swan heard Clinton describing the plant cells with nuclei, he was struck by the similarity of these plant cells to cells and with what he observed in animal tissue. The two scientists went immediately to the Swan's lab to look at his slides. Swan published his book on plant and the animal cell. In the next year, a treatise devoid of acknowledgement of anyone else's contribution, including that of Clinton. He summarized his observation into three conclusions about the cell, which we call it as a cell theory. Cell is a unit of structure, physiology, and organization in the living cell things. The cells retain a dual existence as a distinct entity and forms a building block in the construction of the entire organism. And cells arise spontaneously, that cells form by free cell formation, similar to the formation of a crystals, which supports a spontaneous generation. And we know today that the first two points are correct, but the third one is clearly wrong, as the cell do not arise spontaneously. The correct interpretation of cell formation by division was finally promoted by others and formally initiated by the Rudolf Virchow powerful sentence that all cells arise only from the pre-existing cells. So there they reformulate the cell theory, which we call it as a modern cell theory. All known living things are made up of cells. Cell is a structural function of all living things. All cells comes from the pre-existing cells by the division, and they do not arise spontaneously. And the cells contains hereditary information which is passed from cell to cell during the cell division. And all cells are basically have the same in their chemical composition, and all energy flow, the metabolism, the biochemistry or the physiology of life occurs within the cells. These are the postulates of a modern cell theory. As with the rapid growth of molecular biology in the mid 20th century, cell biology research exploded in the 1950s. It became possible to maintain, grow, and manipulate cells outside of the living organism. The first continuous cell line to be so cultured was in 1951 by George Watteau Gay and co-workers, where they derived the cervical cancer cells taken from the Henrietta Lack, who died from her cancer in the year 1951. The cell line, which was derived from the cancer, which was eventually referred as HeLa cells, have been a watershed in studying the cell biology in the way that structure of DNA was a significant breakthrough of molecular biology. Hope you have understood what is cell biology, what are the different type of cells, prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells, and what are the important milestones in cell biology in bringing about the cell theory and the modern cell theory. Thank you guys.